I was reflecting on the changes that have happened all around us in society and in the church, and was reminded of Michelle Obama's book. She writes, "For me, becoming isn't about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain aim. I see it instead as a forward motion, a means of evolving, a way to reach continuously toward a better self." She adds, "The journey never ends." Her words resonate for me for obvious reasons, but when I think about Southminster, we too are in a state of becoming. The pandemic and the state of the world these past few years and the recent experiences as a community of faith, there's been a lot of shifting and moving and growing and changing, morphing and developing. All of it suggests becoming. The impact of internal and external forces such as the changing demographics, the increasing cultural and political divides, rising inflation, an unjust war, and just the overall clash of values, like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, a law that recently passed that bans gay education through grade 3. We are not the same community as we were 3 years ago, and yet our society and what is happening all around us is having an impact on who we become. In some cases, we are hitting the refresh button. In others, we are leaving things behind. And still in others, we are collectively looking ahead at what is to come. We are becoming. Hamlet once said, "To be or not to be, that is the question." Shakespeare discusses how painful and miserable human life is, and how death would be preferable would it not be for the fearful uncertainty of what comes after death. To be or not to be. This morning, I want to make that question a bit less existential and more about self-discovery and growth. All of us are on a journey that can certainly be miserable at times. But on this journey, some of us remain static and others are more dynamic. Some of us are continually becoming and others are not. As I think about Southminster in the years ahead, as we become, the words that come to mind for me are equity-focused, others-centered, and openness to evolving. A strong commitment in our church is to racial equity, social justice, and inclusivity. This means that we seek ways to embrace others who are different and are courageous to challenge systems that unfairly treats them because of those differences. Sometimes it is not easy or comfortable. It means that we are committing to becoming aware of our own hidden biases and faulty assumptions and taking steps to change our language and our perceptions and even our actions. Sometimes we stumble, but we recognize that becoming is not about perfection, but about growth. I recall an experience in 2017 when my family traveled to Australia. For 5 days, we stayed at our Pakistani friend's home, the Yusufs, who live in Brisbane. We were treated like royalty. They were so good to us. Every day we ate Pakistani food and laughed like we had known each other our whole lives. It soon became apparent that their political and religious views had become very different than ours. But that didn't matter. There were cultural differences, to be sure. The men did not shake hands with unknown women. Yet, our differences did not keep us or break us apart, but deepened our conversations to a place I never expected. There are huge differences in how conservative and progressives see the world. There are huge differences in cultures and religious experiences. I admit that I am on a journey of understanding those differences. Admittedly, I have sometimes hardened my heart to some people and labeled them before I get to know them. I am trying to work on my hidden biases and not let them become the basis for misguided assumptions. It is not easy. I would much rather not do the hard work of dialogue. It is easier to walk away. But I am working on staying in the conversation for the sake of our shared humanity. 5 years ago, after visiting Australia, I recognized I did not have many people of color or Republicans or people of other religions in my newsfeed. They weren't in my current circle of influence. I looked at Facebook and there was very little evidence that they existed in my world. And I realized that most of the blame was on my lack of intentionality in seeking out friendships across difference. White privilege. So I made it a goal to meet someone who looked different than me every quarter. This led to the development of a dialogue group at Clark College that I began with 5 people of color and myself who meet once a month for support and conversation and dialogue. Hands down, the best thing I've ever done in my life. Today, my circle of influence and my Facebook newsfeed is much more diverse. Theologian Frederick Buechner writes, "To grit your teeth and clench your fists in order to survive the world at its harshest and worst is by that very act to be unable to let something be done for you and in you that is more wonderful still." Sheltering ourselves from those whom we may disagree with or who are culturally different than ourselves only serves to isolate us further from each other. We miss out on something that is more wonderful. It might be more secure or bring us solace to be in a community of like-minded people that look like us most of the time, but that is not the vision of the beloved community. And by itself will only lead to isolation, loneliness, and division. Who are the people that you have shut out or simply don't have in your circle of influence? Maybe it is time for you and me to move closer, to become intentional about widening our circles. Our Pakistani friends in Australia differ from us in so many ways, but it is hard to hate close up. We need to continuously move toward our better selves, to become, to be, or not to be. Becoming reminds us all that we are on a journey. None of us have arrived. We're all working at being more inclusive. At Southminster, we strive for excellence in all that we do. We have programs that are filled with excellence. Our music ministry, our art show, our adult ed. We don't do things mediocre here. Michelle Obama writes, if we want to reach the potential of our ability to contribute significantly to building a better world, our challenge is this. Our excellence lies to a great degree to the initiatives of individuals. Perhaps our greatest challenge for us as individuals and as a church is trying to do too many things. And sometimes we can become so focused on our own close contacts that we lose the sight of others. For example, a member of the church recently met with me and shared with me her observation that a visitor to Southminster was left by himself at coffee hour with no one connecting with him for over 10 minutes. Just 3 weeks ago. There was a study conducted at Princeton Theological Seminary about 5 years ago now. Students studying to be ministers were asked to reflect on the Good Samaritan parable and then give a short speech about it. These ministry students at Princeton were being set up for an experiment that they did not know was taking place. The students were sent rushing from one building on campus to another to give their prepared speech about this parable on mercy. Unbeknownst to them, they were set up to pass an injured person in need of help along the way. And the researchers were curious to find out how many of them would actually stop and help. Believe it or not, few of the students actually stopped and helped the injured person. Think about that for a minute. On their way to share their theological reflection on the biblical story of helping others, most of these future ministers walked right past someone in need. In fact, one of them even stepped over the man. To be or not to be. And finally, my hope for us is that we will always be open to evolving. There is an agility and nimbleness that we must maintain when we think about our evolving ministries. Various think tanks and religious researchers have noted a significant change and shift in religious experience, even in the past 2 years. For the first time in a long time, there appear to be signs that progressive churches are slightly growing instead of declining, and conservative churches are in fact in decline. A cultural shift is happening. Even though the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida passed to ban gay curriculum, you should also be aware that up to 70% of Floridians do not agree with that bill. And yet the power structures allowed it to happen. It is clear that the future of Southminster will need to meet challenges of every stripe. Zoom or some form of it will always be with us. Family ministries will need to work with children and youth and families by providing many points of contact throughout the week, rather than expecting them to always come on Sunday mornings. Specifically, what that looks like and what we choose to make our priorities moving forward is yet to be determined. But regardless, we need to take on a growth mindset. We need to be ready to respond, come what may. Michelle Obama talks about the process of becoming known. What are you known for? What are we known for at Southminster? Whoever you are, we welcome you on our journey toward becoming. Southminster, too, is in the state of becoming. None of us have arrived. The journey never ends. As we enter our unknown future, as we tackle many challenges, some that we expect, some unexpected, let us remember that becoming requires patience and rigor and contemplation. As Michelle Obama reminds us, let us never give up on the idea that there is more growing to be done. So I want to encourage you today to pause, to take a deep breath. Take a moment this morning for some self-reflection. How are you doing on the road to becoming? Where do you need to be more equitable, more focused on equity? In your busy life, do you take time or take steps to notice others who are new or different? How are you evolving as a person? Once we answer those questions as individuals, then we can ask, how are we doing as a community of faith? To be or not to be? That is the question. Amen.